All right, these are rubber tubing exercises. Oftentimes when we need to rehabilitate or re-strengthen the tendons of the rotator cuff in the shoulder, they respond very well to rubber tubing. If we put weight on in a gym or with hand weights, sometimes it tends to be too compressing and it closes the joint and creates more aggravation of the shoulder. Rubber tubing is very similar to tendon and ligament in its ability to stretch. So we use rubber tubing to help rehabilitate it. You probably should have received a piece of rubber tubing from our office and the instructions on how to do these exercises. Hopefully you have those with you. If you don't have those, you won't be able to do these exercises today. There are 8 exercises on the sheet. I'm going to go over them with you. On the sheet, it talks about how to put the rubber tubing around a doorknob. We don't need to do that. The trouble with that is the doorknob's not always the right height for each of us. So what we do is, with the rubber tubing, you'll notice that there's one end that has a single knot tied to it and then multiple knots on the other end. The single knot is for closing in the door frame to secure it, and the other knots are for options about where to hold it for tension. So to secure the single knot in the doorway, open the door to set the knot midway between your elbow and shoulder, right in the middle of your biceps is the right height for all of us. So I close it in the doorway. The knot is on the other side of the door, and when you close it, the door latch will secure the door so that you won't pull it open. What we do then is use the sheet to determine how to stretch with the rubber tubing. The first exercise on the sheet, it shows you on the diagrams is where you start and where you finish. So you start and finish in this direction, as you'll see on the sheet. Now with all of these exercises, the closer you stand to the door, the easier it's going to be, and the further away it's going to be harder. You have to determine the distance that will support about 15 repetitions of each of these 8 exercises. If it's too uncomfortable, you want to stay close to the door, that's okay, because probably what you'll notice with the 8 exercises too is some of them will be easier and some of them will be harder because it's a different part of your rotator cuff that needs attention. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to have the same distance for all of them. The other thing that's important is don't try to do too many or too much tension in the beginning, because an hour or two later or that night or the next day you might feel very uncomfortable with it because you overstretch it. So baby it in the beginning, find the number of repetitions that's comfortable for you before you move on. As a side note, you'll never do more than 15 repetitions of each of these exercises. You might do multiple sets, but there's no reason to fatigue it past 15 repetitions. That would be fine. So that first one is here. You see on the sheet there's a second one. What you have to do with these exercises on the sheet, sometimes it shows the right arm in the diagram, but sometimes it shows the left arm. So you have to use your brain a little bit and you say, okay, if I'm standing here, this is the left side. You might have to turn around and do a different location. You shouldn't, with any of these exercises, don't have to move the rubber tubing in the doorway. You just have to change your orientation based on the exercise. So I don't need to go through all of them. They're pretty self-explanatory, except for the last one. On the last exercise, what we see is that the rubber tubing looks like it's overhead. And you'll see that here. It's a throwing, it's a serving, like a tennis serving motion. You don't have to move it up here in the doorway as it appears. You can kneel in front of it or set a chair or a stool right in front of it, and now it's overhead for that serving or throwing motion. The speed on all of these exercises is about like this, and you'll end up doing 15 of each exercise. What we'll do is we'll go over in the office when you come in, as you're progressing, whether you should do more or whether you should advance to more difficult exercise for your shoulder and rotator cuff. But those are shoulder rubber tubing exercises.